Health and fitness requires more than just the physical work. It starts with the work you put in to grow your mind. Welcome to the Mind Gains podcast, where we discuss what it takes mentally to see results physically. I'm your host, Jess. Let's get started. As a health and fitness coach, I'm sure you can imagine just how many conversations I have on a daily and weekly basis on all things nutrition. And as a health and fitness coach, I love it. I love talking about and educating on anything nutrition related. And the reason for this, because for myself and for 99% of the population, nutrition is hands down the hardest part of anything health and fitness related. There is so much nonsense out there when it comes to nutrition, and all these fad diets and crash diets are really toxic, for lack of a better word. Like straight up, nothing good can come from them. They're quick fixes for something that is impossible to fix quickly. But they're so heavily pushed that a lot of people just don't know any better. They think they're going to get the results they want from taking a shortcut on something you cannot take a shortcut with. And even if you do know that restrictive diets aren't the way to go, nutrition is still hard because it makes up most of your results. Like what you put into your body all day, every day, is a direct reflection on what you look like and what you feel like. So, nutrition is hard. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I think we all know it's hard. Nothing about this is easy, but it's not impossible. Just because it's hard doesn't mean that you can't or shouldn't do it. Because the more you do it, the longer you practice with your nutrition, the better you're going to get at it and the easier it's going to become. Just like with literally anything else in life. If you're just starting out with paying attention to your nutrition and tracking macros, it's going to be hard. You have to expect that. But I can also sit here and bet that when you first were learning how to drive a car, that was hard too. But you learned it, you practiced it, and now probably years later, it's not something you sweat at all because you've got it in the bag at this point. Nutrition and tracking your food works the same way. It's still probably going to always be the hardest part for most of us, even after we've done it for a while and gotten really comfortable with it. I know this is the case for me because at this point, it is really easy to get to the gym most of the time. Like I'm just kind of on autopilot when my alarm goes off at 5, 6 a.m. And I know I'm just going to get up, get ready, and go to the gym. That's the easy part. Nutrition for me is way, way, way easier now than it was when I first started, but it still is the hardest part. Not because I don't know what to do or how to eat or how to manipulate my intake to achieve a desired result, but simply because it takes up the other 23 hours of my day that I'm not at the gym. It's always going to be the hardest because I'm sorry, but I'm never going to not want the cookie. I'm never going to not want the slice of pizza. I 100% want those things. And I can definitely have them from time to time. But making a conscious decision every day to fuel my body well with whole foods and good nutrients over, the hyper palatable foods that are literally designed to keep us addicted and eating them is always going to be harder than getting to the gym for an hour. I'm not saying any of this to make you think that I'm just always telling myself no and restricting myself all hours of the day because I'm definitely not doing that. Not at all. I have learned to love eating whole foods because of the way they make me feel. I do love whole foods now. I didn't before, but I do now. But I do still also love the sweets. It's just about finding a balance between the two and giving your body the nutrients it quite literally needs to function correctly most of the time. And then adding in the other less nutrient dense options in moderation. So, all of that to say that if you feel you struggle with nutrition the most out of any piece of your health and fitness journey, you are not alone. We all feel the same exact way. But I promise it gets easier. It gets a lot easier, especially the more invested you become in this journey. We all have to go through the valley to get to the mountaintop, but you will get there if you just keep going. Being that nutrition is the hardest part of all of this, and because there's so much confusion around it, it's my favorite thing to talk about. I struggled hard with nutrition for years. I was very lost and very confused and very overwhelmed. I had no idea where to start. And once I started learning the truths behind nutrition and learning what the facts were and what the myths were, I became so just like fascinated with it because I could just feel all of the confusion starting to clear up. And I want that for you too. I have this indescribable need to get the facts out to people in regards to nutrition because, not to sound dramatic, but it literally changed the trajectory of my life. And I know it will do the same for some of you as well. So, nutrition is my absolute favorite topic, and I want to talk about it here and give some insights on it. And I will definitely be doing quite a few episodes in the future on different topics within nutrition. But for today, I want to start off with macro tracking because I think it's one of the most important things to understand. Because I could start off with how much food you should be eating, how much protein, how many carbs, fats, all of that. But truthfully, until you have tracking macros down, you're probably still going to struggle in those other areas. So I think it's best that we start here. And my goal for today is to get into really what tracking is, what it is not, and some tips on how to make macro tracking simple. So, welcome to Macro Tracking 101. Let's start with what macro tracking is, because when I first heard the term tracking macros, I had zero idea what that meant. I didn't know what a macro was or how to track them. So, first off, macros, which is just short for macronutrients, are made up of proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. The reason these three are called macronutrients is because your body requires large amounts of them. It's what all the food you consume is made up of. It's a mixture of proteins, carbs, and fats. Now, just a quick sidebar because if you've heard of macros, you've probably heard of micros as well. Micros or micronutrients are things like vitamins and minerals, and they're called this because your body only needs small amounts of them. The foods you eat do also have vitamins and minerals, but they're in much smaller quantities than your macronutrients are. So when you hear someone say macro tracking or I'm tracking macros, that just essentially means they're tracking their food intake, therefore, being able to see how many grams of protein, carbs, and fats they're consuming throughout the day. The second I or anyone else who does this brings up tracking food, most people shut down. This is where we lose people. This is where they say, I'm out. I'm not doing that. That's too much. That's obsessive. That's restrictive. All the things that tracking food isn't. So, I want to go over what macro tracking is and what it is not. Tracking macros is the only surefire way to know that you will reach whatever goal you have, whether it's building muscle, losing fat, body recomp, whatever. It is the only way to know exactly what you're putting into your body. Most people do not want to hear this, and I get it. I was in the same exact boat. Too bad. You need to accept it and move on. If you know that 80 I always argue closer to 90% of your results comes from the food you are or are not putting into your body, why are you going to leave the biggest piece of this puzzle up to complete chance? That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. And I can almost guarantee you're not going to see the results you want. Or at the very least, if you do, it's going to take you a lot longer to get there, which who wants that? This all already takes long enough as is. We don't need to be delaying things further for no reason at all. Now, people will argue that you can intuitively eat, and I don't disagree. I 100% think intuitively eating is something that you can do, but unpopular opinion, you can't intuitively eat if you've never spent any time tracking your food. If you never went to school to learn how to fly a plane, are you going to sit here and say you know how to fly yourself from your current destination to Hawaii? No, because you've never actually gotten behind the wheel of the plane or whatever it's called, the cockpit. You've never actually taken a class to learn what you need to learn, gotten into the cockpit, and flew a plane before. And if you just try to do it now, I think you're going to be flying pretty blind because you're not going to know what you're doing. So that might ruffle a few feathers, but I don't believe you can know how to truly intuitively eat and know how to manipulate your nutrition to reach whatever goal you have if you've never tracked before. Now, let's talk about what tracking macros isn't. It is not restrictive. Tracking apps are educational tools. They're to be used so that you can learn about the foods you're eating, so that you can see how much protein and carbs and fats are in your dinner, so that you can see what foods help progress you towards your goals better than others. It's the same exact thing as keeping a budget. Having a budget isn't restrictive. Just because you pay attention to where your money is going doesn't mean you can't ever buy the things you want. It just helps you to be able to better make decisions and maybe decide what areas you'd like to splurge a little on and which ones aren't worth it to you to drop hundreds of dollars. Tracking your food is the same exact thing. Just because you track your food doesn't mean that you can't eat a piece of cake at your boyfriend's birthday celebration. It means that you see how you can work that piece of cake in ahead of time, log it in, have the piece of cake, and move on with your day. Your tracking app isn't restricting. It's not sitting here yelling at you because you logged a couple slices of pizza in for your lunch. It's just telling you, hey, this is how many calories those two slices of pizza were, and this is how many grams of protein, carbs, and fats you got from it. Like, don't demonize tracking. And the thing that really gets me is the people that will die on the hill of tracking being restrictive are the same ones who have never tracked a single day in their life. It's crazy. Anyways, tracking your food isn't inherently restrictive. It's only restrictive if you make it that way. If you decide to only eat 1,300 calories a day and never include any of the foods that you love or are craving, or you're constantly telling yourself, nope, can't have that, nope, can't have that, nope, can't have that, you are making it restrictive. Don't blame that on the tracking app. It's you putting that on yourself. Some people do this, and I'm not here to condone that. That is tracking the wrong way. I am like the biggest advocate for tracking, but make it balanced. You want to aim for an 80-20 balance every single day. 80% of the time, you're hitting your macros to a T, you're eating whole foods, you're prioritizing protein, you're eating good, nutrient dense, home cooked meals. But the other 20% of the time, enjoy that meal out. Enjoy the dessert, the snacks, the sweets, the drink, the whatever your thing is. This is all about a healthy balance. And quite honestly, if you're not tracking or you're kind of just like loosely tracking, some days you kind of do it, some days you don't, you might think you're doing an 80-20 balance, but in reality, you're sitting more at a 60-40 balance or even a 50-50 balance. We always think we're doing better than we are if we're not paying attention to it. This is just human nature. We tend to give ourselves more credit than we deserve in this regard. We think it's not that bad. And then when you actually get into the weeds of it and educate yourself on what your habits really look like, what your food choices really look like, is pretty freaking bad. And you don't have to do it forever. Like, I don't plan on tracking my food intake when I'm 60, 70, 80 years old. Like, that's just not going to happen. But you want to know why? Because I'm spending the time now to learn about food. I'm putting in the time now so that I can transfer over to intuitive eating once I reach all of my physical goals and I can kind of just maintain that from there on out. You can track for years if you want to. This is what I'm doing, but honestly, because really for a couple reasons. One, like I said, I still have physical goals that I want to reach, and I want to reach those goals as quickly as possible. So, why would I waste any time not tracking my food and not knowing exactly how much I'm eating and whether I'm making progress towards them each day or not? And two, because I genuinely like tracking now. Was it a pain in the beginning? Absolutely. Was it worth that initial headache and learning curve to be where I'm at today? 1,000,000%. Spending a few months really learning how to track my food was an investment into my health and fitness goals that I was completely okay with making. And now I'm much better off for it and so happy I put in the time to learn how to track. Because here's the thing, having specific physical goals and deciding not to track your food is like having access to a GPS and just deciding not to use it. Like, you have a destination you want to reach and you have no idea how to get there. You don't know how far away you are. You don't know what roads to take. You don't know how long it's going to take you to get there. You have access to the GPS. All you got to do is pull it up on your phone, plug the address in, and you've got a direct route to get to your desired destination. But you decide, "Ugh, I gotta pull up the GPS and type out the address. That's too much work. I know what I'll do instead. I'll just drive around aimlessly and hope I get there eventually." How ridiculous is that? Like, just plug in the address and follow the GPS, and you'll be at your destination in no time. Why would you not do this? Deciding not to track your food is the same exact thing, guys. The same exact thing. And I really don't know anyone who would purposefully not use a GPS, even though it's going to give you the quickest route from point A to point B. So, why do we do this with tracking? If you have specific physique goals, you want to lose X amount of body fat, or you want to put on X amount of muscle mass, if you have specific goals, you have to get specific with the thing that makes up most of your results, aka your nutrition. So I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. But again, I like tracking now. I like knowing exactly what I'm eating every day. I like learning now about the nutritional value of different foods. I like knowing every single day that I'm one day closer to seeing those physical results. Instead of sitting here saying, well, I hope I'm making progress, I don't want to hope. I want to know. So I personally love tracking my food now. But if you want to just do it for a short while, learn some of the very basics that you need to, and then move on from it, you can do that too. You're not signing like a lifelong commitment contract to track your food every single day for the rest of your life. You can do it for as long or as little as you want to. But I can almost guarantee that if you actually spend some time learning how to track, you're not going to want to stop. Because after a while, you will start seeing the results you want, and then knowing that you tracking your food intake is what 100% guarantees you those results, who would want to throw that away? Don't toss the GPS out just because it takes one extra step to pull up the app and put an address in. I promise it's going to take you a lot longer to reach your destination if you don't use the GPS. That is, if you ever even make it at all. In summation, tracking your food or macros or however you want to say it isn't restrictive. It isn't something you have to do forever, but if you can learn it, show up consistently with it, and follow the plan, it guarantees you the results you want. It's a tool that should be used for educational purposes and to help you reach your goals, not to restrict yourself. It should add value to your life in your journey, not rule over it. And it should be approached with an 80-20 balance. Now that we know what tracking is and what it isn't, let's get into how to track macros. First and foremost, and I cannot stress this enough, when you first download a tracking app and get it all set up with your height and your weight and your estimated activity level and what your goal is, the app is going to generate a calorie intake specific to you. I'm using air quotes around that. It's not specific to you at all. The tracking app doesn't know a single real thing about you, your dieting history, your real activity level, your genetics, nothing. I'm going to tell you right now, the number it gives you for your calorie intake is complete and utter bullcrap. Do not listen to it. Most of the time, it's going to give you a number way lower than what you should actually be eating. I spoke about this previously in another episode, but going over this again, When you start tracking your food, you need to just simply track your normal food intake for about a week before setting up any calorie or macro targets for yourself. So when you download the app for the first week afterwards, do not change anything about your intake or your eating habits. Keep everything exactly the same and just simply track what you're eating to get an idea of what your current intake has looked like. Most of us naturally tend to start eating a little bit better when we start tracking because we're just more aware of our food choices. I don't care if you're currently eating McDonald's 3 times a day. If that's what you're doing right now, keep doing it for the next week after downloading the app and just track what your intake is. If you start changing things, you're not going to get an accurate idea of what your intake looked like, which is what we need to see. After that first week of tracking without changing any of your habits or food choices, you would take the average of your calorie intake for that week. So, add up all the calories and divide by however many days you tracked. If you truly did it for a week, this would be by 7, and that is what your current average caloric intake is. That is how you find your baseline and how you know how much to be eating moving forward, just depending on what your goal is. Just to give you an idea, when I first started tracking, I was averaging about 2,000 calories a day. And my tracking app, I remember, told me that I should be eating 1,200 calories a day. 1,200 calories. First off, that is not enough calories for anyone. Secondly, if I had actually taken that number and ran with it, yeah, I would have seen weight loss results, but there's no way I could have stuck to that number for more than a week at most. I would have been starving. So take it from me, do not just go based off the number the app generates for you. When it comes to tracking, your best friend is going to be the barcode scanner. I know I've mentioned this before, but when I first started tracking my food, I didn't have the barcode scanner for the first little bit, and that made my life a lot harder. Because with the scanner, you just scan the barcode of your foods and it pulls up all the nutrition facts, and then you just log in however much you ate of that food or that ingredient. If you don't have the scanner, you have to manually search in the database for every single little thing you eat. And that gave me a headache. There's honestly a lot of little things that you encounter when you first start tracking that you're not going to know how to handle. Like, you're not going to know how to track it. You're not going to know what to do in blank situation. I'm telling you this so you're prepared. It feels like a lot at the beginning, but there are tips and tricks and ways to go about it that it's not a headache at all. Again, it comes down to knowing some of the ways to make it easier, but also just time and practice and learning how to handle different situations. So, I want to go over some of my tips for tracking. Tip number one, like I mentioned, get a tracking app where you can use the barcode scanner. I currently use Macros First. It's completely free and it works great. I know there's some other tracking apps out there that give you the scanner for free, but this is the one that I use. Tip number two, use a food scale. Actually, this isn't even a tip because it's not a suggestion, it's a requirement. In order to accurately track your food, you have to use a food scale and weigh out your food. Again, will it be a pain at first? Yup. Do you reach a point that it's so effortless and quick? Also, yes. I can't tell you how unfazed I am by weighing out and tracking my food at this point because it's just a habit. It's just something that's part of my day to day. And it takes literally 2 extra seconds now. And in my opinion, taking an extra 2 seconds every time I'm eating something to know I'm going to reach my goal is without a doubt worth it. So use a food scale. If you're not actually weighing out your food, it's really unlikely that you're going to be tracking accurately at all. If you're having steak for dinner and you search up steak and find an option that just says 1 medium steak, and you log that in and call it a day, the likelihood that the calories and macro content it's giving you is at all close to being accurate is very low. Is the app counting a medium-sized steak as 3 ounces, 4 ounces, 5 ounces? I actually pulled up a sirloin steak in Macros First to show you what I mean. If you just track 1 medium steak, it says the calories is 324 calories and 49 grams of protein. Now, if you were being accurate in weighing out that piece of steak and it ended up being 3 ounces, now the macros change to 166 calories and 25 grams of protein. For 4 ounces of that same steak, it's 221 calories and 34 grams of protein. For 5 ounces of steak, it's 276 calories and 42 grams of protein. Do you see the difference between these? And this could go either way. You could log in just that medium sized steak for 324 calories and 49 grams of protein. And then in reality, you're only eating 3 ounces of it, which is 166 calories and 25 grams of protein. You're eating half of what you logged in this instance. Or it could go the other way, and you could be eating more calories and protein than what you have logged, just depending on what the tracking app is counting as a medium sized steak. If you're not actually weighing out your food and then logging that in, you're probably not tracking accurately at all. And if that's what you're doing, then what's the point? The two things go hand in hand. So, not so much of a tip as it is a requirement here. Tip number 3 when it comes to tracking, you want to track all of your foods in things like grams, ounces, fluid ounces, milliliters. Do not track in terms of cups, tablespoons, teaspoons, things like that. If you are, once again, you're probably not going to be super accurate with your tracking. Here's an example. Let's just say that you are tracking in peanut butter. Maybe you're having an apple with some peanut butter. So you've tracked your apple, now you're tracking your peanut butter. If you were just tracking, I don't know, let's just say 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, that would be around 190 calories, just depending on what brand you're using. So let's just say 190 calories for those 2 tablespoons. And you look at the nutrition facts label, and it says that 2 tablespoons is equal to 33 grams of that peanut butter. But if you use the actual tablespoon to scoop out the peanut butter and add it to your plate, a lot of the time, it's not actually going to weigh 33 grams. It might weigh closer to 40 or 45 grams, bringing the calories up to like 230 or 260 calories, whereas you have 190 accounted for. It's not very accurate. So, what you want to do instead is in your tracking app, switch it over to track in grams instead of tablespoons and use that to track instead. So, you would just set your plate on the food scale, zero it out, then add your peanut butter until you reach 33 grams, or really however much you want to reach your goals. It is way more accurate to track everything like this. Again, the food scale isn't optional. When I first started tracking, I used to literally take a tablespoon and pour out however many tablespoons of my coffee creamer I was tracking into my coffee. And it just hit me one day. It was like a light bulb went off. Like, why am I doing this? All I have to do instead is set my cup of coffee on the food scale, zero it out, and then add however many grams of the creamer I was having. It's so much easier this way. And again, the way you're going to know how much to weigh out, let's just say you were having 2 tablespoons of coffee creamer with your coffee every day. If you look at the nutrition label on the creamer, it will typically say how many grams or ounces or milliliters is equal to however many tablespoons. So if you see it says 1 tablespoon is equal to 15 grams and you want 2 tablespoons of creamer, you just pour in the creamer until the scale reaches 30 grams. It's that simple. It is so much easier doing it this way rather than like taking the tablespoon and actually using that to weigh everything out. It's easier and it's way more accurate. Tip number 4, pre-log. Pre-log your meals. This is something that I do every single night. Every night when I'm sitting on the couch watching TV or whatever I'm doing, I will go into my tracking app, switch over to the next day, and log everything I plan on eating for the day. I start with my main meals, so breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Then I move on to dessert because I have dessert every single night. And then I add in some snacks with whatever calories I have left. This is how you can make sure, without a doubt, that you will be able to reach your calorie target and all of your macro targets every single day. Because what happens is most of the time, people wait until the day of and just track out whatever they're having as they go throughout the day. The problem with doing this is a lot of the time, they're going to get to the end of their night and they don't have a lot of calories left to work with, but they're not anywhere close to reaching their protein goal. So now they have to decide if they're going to stay at their calorie goal and then miss out on reaching their protein target, or if they're going to reach their protein target but are way over on their calorie goal because they can't go back and change what they had to eat earlier in the day. What's done is done. There is no changing it at that point. It's very hard to reach both goals if this is the way you're approaching your day. But when you pre-log your food, you can see the entire day ahead of time and move things around and manipulate them in order to be able to reach all of your goals with no problem every single time, which is obviously what we want if we're tracking. What's the point of tracking if you're not ever going to reach your targets? And your pre-log isn't set in stone. It's not like you can never make any changes on the day of. You absolutely can. I do sometimes. I'll switch things out if I decide I'd rather have salmon and rice for dinner than the steak I had planned. But having that plan to follow every day and knowing that if you're able to stick to it, you will reach all of your targets is so helpful. Pre-logging is the biggest tip I could ever give you with nutrition. I have pre-logged every single day for almost 2 years, and it's the sole reason why I've been able to hit all of my targets spot on almost every single day for the past 2 years. Do not leave your results up to chance by not pre-logging. And I have so many conversations with people that tell me it's just so hard to reach their nutrition targets and they make excuses on why they're never reaching their targets. But when I say, okay, well, are you pre-logging? Most of the time, the answer is no. Like, no wonder it's hard to reach your nutrition goals because you're not planning ahead of time to be successful. It's not just gonna happen. None of this is going to happen by accident. You have to plan to be successful. And the way to do that with your nutrition, pre-log. Like, that is it. That is the only answer I have for you. If you want success in this journey, and if you want it bad enough, you're gonna do the things that are required for you to be successful. It's not that you don't know what to do at this point, it's just that it's not a big enough priority for you. So if you're not pre-logging your food, but you're saying it's hard to reach your nutrition goals, you're kidding yourself. If you're pre-logging, it's not hard. You're just not willing to do what it takes to be successful. So please, for the love of all that is holy, pre-log your food so that you can start winning with your nutrition. You're also going to want to save meals as you create them. This is also where it's going to be more time consuming and annoying at the start because you don't have anything saved. But as you're logging your food every day, save those things as meals. That way, you don't have to go in and log every single ingredient every time you make the pasta with shrimp you love so much. Log it once, save it as a meal, and then next week when you make pasta with shrimp again, all you have to do is go to your saved meals, select it, and add it to your day. You don't have to log each individual ingredient ever again after the first time. So, as you can imagine, at the start, when you have nothing saved, it's going to take a little bit more time. But again, it's an investment. You do that for a little while right at the start. Then, after you've been tracking for a bit, all of your go to meals are already saved. And all you have to do is click two buttons to add it to your day instead of adding each ingredient over and over again. So, save meals and keep your meals on repeat. Like, make it easy on yourself. I know for me, I have the same exact breakfast almost every single day because I love it and because it's quick and it's easy. So when I'm pre-logging at night for the next day for my breakfast, all I have to do is copy and paste my breakfast meal from the previous day. It's so quick and easy. When I tell you that it takes me less than 1 minute every night to pre-log my stuff, I'm not even kidding. It's so quick. 1 minute to set myself up for success every day. It couldn't be easier, especially if you're saving your meals. Tip number 5, when you're first starting out with tracking, do not pay attention to your carbs and fats. Only pay attention to your calorie intake and your protein intake. And honestly, even if you struggle with that, just pay attention to calories and then work on protein. When you try to learn all of them at once, it's too much. A lot of the time, this is when people quit because they feel overwhelmed with trying to reach all four goals. Plus, their sodium intake and fiber and sugar intake. Like, just track your calories and your protein. This is really all you need to begin with. Do not overwhelm yourself by trying to reach all the targets that are there. This is what I did. I didn't pay attention at all to carbs or fats for the entirety of my 25-pound fat loss journey. As long as you are sticking with your calorie and protein goals, this is really all you need. Tip number 6, do not stress yourself out over, well, how do I track if I'm eating out? What do I do without my food scale? I promise you will be fine. When you go out to eat, or if you're just in a situation where you don't fully know how much of each ingredient you're eating because you personally did not make it, just do your best. That is it. I still recommend tracking that meal out because there is power in getting a ballpark idea of what you're consuming. It's not going to be 100% accurate, but getting an idea of what your meal looks like is better than not tracking at all. So just do your best. If I'm eating out, here's how I approach it. First, if I know where I'll be eating out at ahead of time, I will look up their menu online and decide what I'm going to order ahead of time. I make a plan for myself. I will then see if they have the nutrition facts anywhere online. If they do, great. I will, just search up whatever I plan on ordering and log it in ahead of time. If not, I'll look up another restaurant that I know has something similar to whatever I plan on ordering. My go to is the Cheesecake Factory because they have, I think, the biggest menu I have ever seen in my life. And they have such a wide variety of options that 9 times out of 10, I can find something on their menu that is pretty similar to whatever I'm going to be having. So I will log in that item. If all else fails and I can't find anything similar to the meal I plan on having on their menu, I will just look that meal up in my tracking app. It will typically give a very wide range of options, calorie and protein wise. So I just look for something that is kind of middle of the road, teetering more on the higher end for calories and the lower end for protein. And that is what I will log in. I will say that the longer you've been tracking your food for, the easier this becomes as well. Because after a while, you'll be able to see the amount of rice and chicken and noodles that was served to you at the hibachi dinner. And you'll be able to eyeball that and guess about how many calories and protein and carbs, fats, all of that is sitting on your plate. Why? Because I'll say it again, tracking is an educational tool. And after you've been doing it for a little while, you start to be able to look at a piece of chicken and say, that looks like it's about 4 ounces to me. And you'll be able to more accurately guess how many calories and how much protein is in that piece of chicken. So, this is something you will also be able to start doing eventually as well, which helps with being able to track more accurately while eating out. You just have to put in the time and the practice with it. You weren't ever going to get comfortable with driving your car if you never got behind the wheel and practiced. Same thing here. I want to go through an example of what pre-logging might look like just so you can see how simple it is and how much it'll help you to be able to reach your targets. So, using some of the typical things I eat as an example, again, I always start off with my main meals. I know for a fact I have the same breakfast and my coffee pretty much every single day. So I'm just going to copy and paste my breakfast meal and my coffee to tomorrow. Moving on to lunch, I might decide to do a ham sandwich for lunch. So I log my 2 slices of bread, my mayo, my ham, and some lettuce, and I will add some chips on the side of my lunch. Then I move on to dinner. For dinner, I'm going to log in some teriyaki chicken I know that I have in the fridge and I know can make that. Maybe some rice, and I will add some zucchini on the side with that. So my main meals are done. For dessert, I have ice cream that I make with my Ninja Creamy every night. And it's super easy because I have that saved as a meal in my app. So I just go to my meals and add that ice cream for dessert the next day. And maybe I log in some mango for a snack and some popcorn for my other snack. So now my app is showing that I have reached my calorie intake for the day, but I'm about 15 grams short on protein. So what I do is I pull back from some of the other foods that aren't protein sources and add more of the ones that are protein sources. So maybe I had, let's just say 50 grams of popcorn accounted for. So I bring that down to 30 grams. And I had 20 grams of mayo logged for my sandwich. So I bring that down to 10 grams instead. Now I have extra calories for my day. So I can add in more ham to my sandwich or maybe more of that teriyaki chicken at my dinner. And that will bring my protein intake up. And I just do this until I've reached both my calorie and my protein targets spot on. Again, this process takes me 1 minute or less every single night. If you can just repeat this day after day and stick to the plan that you lay out for yourself, you'll be golden. I've had so many people tell me about the freedom they've found in tracking their food, and it's so true. There is freedom in structure. And I actually just had someone mention to me the other day about how before they started tracking and they were just working out, they couldn't understand why nothing was changing. They felt like they were just working out to maintain where they were currently at. And it's so true. When you don't know what you're putting into your body, you're going to make it really hard on yourself to take steps forward. And I think most people can probably relate to this and have found themselves here at one point, or maybe currently find themselves here. And it's because until you know what your intake is and how to match it to your efforts in the gym, you're most likely going to stay stuck exactly where you are. And nothing is more frustrating than that, than working so hard day after day just to stay exactly the same. We want to be able to take steps forward and actually make progress. And if you're someone who hasn't tried tracking before, I highly urge you to try it out. Because if you do and you stick with it and you learn how to manipulate your intake for different goals during different seasons of your life, I can pretty much right here, right now, almost guarantee you will reach your goals as long as you're consistent with it. So, there are my tips for tracking macros and the very basics behind macro tracking. I know that this was a lot of information. I know that tracking macros can be overwhelming at first, but I promise if you practice it and you just keep doing it, you'll get it in no time. And you'll be so glad you did because you were actually able to not only take steps towards your goals, but take the confusion out of nutrition as well. Just like with anything, it's a skill that takes practice to learn. If you have any questions on tracking or anything nutrition related at all, or if you have certain topics you'd like to hear more about, DM me on Instagram. Otherwise, happy tracking. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you later.